There are some indications that the inclusion of the acronym and the normalization of that depraved lifestyle in synodal documents has been stopped by the Holy Father. This is good news, and credit must be given where it's due, though of course when the final document comes out, hopefully next week, many of us will pore over the document with a fine-tooth comb. I recommend everyone who can read it, and please pay close attention to the footnotes. It was in the footnotes of Amoris Laetitia that the potential heresy was hidden away, forcing several cardinals to write the now all but forgotten and definitely ignored dubia. The earliest reporting on this comes from an Italian Catholic news blog. A link to that report can be found on my blog, which you can find in the description below. Quoting from L'Espresso, the Synod. The Pope has hit the brakes, and on homosexuality, the Catechism still applies. The two synods on the family of 2014 and 2015 were among the most deliberately steered in history. So much so that at the beginning of the second session, 13 top-ranking cardinals wrote a letter to Pope Francis precisely to denounce the maneuvers aimed at producing predetermined results on important disputed questions. The point being that the outcome of that double synod was already decided even before it was celebrated. And its coronation was the post-synodal exhortation Amoris Laetitia, in which Francis gave the go-ahead to communion for the divorced and remarried, in spite of the fact that a good one-third of the Synod Fathers had spoken out against it. Instead, the Synod on Young People that will conclude on Sunday, October 28th, seems to be the most peaceful ever. So peaceful that even the most explosive argument of those put to discussion concerning the judgment on homosexuality was practically diffused. The discussions in the assembly were kept confidential, but according to what was made public by the official information sources, there was not even one statement in favor of a change in Catholic doctrine on homosexuality. And yet the Instrumentum Laboris, meaning the starter document that the Synod Fathers were called to discuss, seemed to promise sparks when it stated in paragraph 197, among other things, introducing for the first time into an official text of the Church the not innocent acronym, what I call here the acronym. Some acronym youths, through various contributions that were received by the General Secretariat of the Synod, wished to benefit from greater closeness and experience greater care by the Church, while some BC asked themselves what to suggest to young people who decide to create homosexual instead of heterosexual couples, and above all, would like to be close to the Church. And, instead, nothing. When it came time to discuss the paragraph in the third week of the Synod, not even those Synod Fathers known as innovators came out into the open, meaning the modernists didn't come out into the open. On the contrary, in reading the few lines dedicated to the topic by what was expected to be of the 14 Circuli Minors, the one most inclined to innovate, Anglicus B, headed by our good friend Cardinal Blaise Cupich, one is struck by its explicit reference to traditional doctrine on homosexuality contained in the Catechism. Here, in fact, is how the relator of Anglicus B summed up the overall perspective of his working group in the Relatio presented in the Assembly on October 20th concerning young people who experience same-sex attraction. Quoting, "We propose a separate section for this issue, and that the main objective of this will be the pastoral accompaniment of these people, which follows the lines of the relevant section of the Catechism in the Catholic Church." So without changing a comma of the Catechism, which on homosexuals, in paragraphs 2357 to 2359 says that, quote, "they must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity, but also that they are, quote, called to chastity because their inclination is objectively disordered." Other circular minors also discuss the question, but always insisting, according to their written accounts, on the goodness of the Church's traditional vision and on the need for the conversion of homosexuals to a chaste life. I'll let you read the rest of that on the blog. This is a very, very good sign, if it's true. The move to stop the, shall we say, Rainbow Coalition from subverting the Church could have been done for any number of reasons. I'll go into those reasons more when the document comes out. For now, I do remain suspicious, and for good reason. There has been much chatter about the Synod being used as an excuse to restructure the governance of the Church. For that, I'll let one of the cardinals close to Francis pitch his case for the change himself.
And to conclude, The important thing, to my mind, is not to always seek new methods to disseminate the youth pastoral. It is the church that needs to change, must become different. The young expect, and they have said this in the pre-synod meetings, that they want an authentic church, open to dialogue, capable of listening. Statements that we find in all the documents, but they must be statements that should not just be statements. They have to be translated into structures, meetings, changes, a message for the whole church, basically. So not... it's not like the bishops meet the young, but as we all meet with each other, God's people. And this is something that in Germany we have underlined, in particular with regard to the abuse scandals. We have to become a different church. We are to be church together, not top-down approach, but rather we need to reflect on how God sees us. We need to listen to each other, look at each other, clearly each from his or her own background or profession. It can be the profession of a bishop, but we need to do this together, and this is visible in the text, in the theme of accompaniment, discernment. Very often when we talk about pastoral care, this is, or we add to this, accompaniment. This is very important for Pope Francis. Accompaniment doesn't mean then that I'm going to decide what you should do, but rather that together we move closer to Christ. A very important approach for the young, but for the whole church, that is to learn from this. Thank you.
What he's talking about is changing the church's governance to be more like that of the Anglican Communion, that branch of Protestantism that appears to be dying faster than the rest of that schismatic movement. To give you an idea of what this terrible idea would look like, let's go over how the Anglican Communion is governed. I'll read directly from their church governance section of Anglican.org. There is no central governance of the Anglican Church. Each of the member churches or provinces of the Anglican Communion is governed independently. The rules under which a church is governed are called canon law. The structure of canon law is not altogether unlike that of modern civil law. A parish has rules or bylaws which must conform to the rules or canons of the diocese of which it is a member. That diocese in turn must stay within the canons of its province or national church. The provinces and national churches, by choice, have inherited the canons of the Christian church dating back to its early days. Sure. This accumulation of canons over the centuries and throughout the world is collectively referred to as Anglican canon law. Emphasis mine. Some of the member churches of the Anglican Communion have placed their constitutions and canons online. So have many dioceses and even a parish or two. You can find these by using a search engine and the keywords Anglican, canon, and law, and what other modifier you like. Every 10 years there is a Lambeth Conference at which all of the bishops of the Anglican Communion gather to debate issues of doctrine. Doctrine can indirectly affect church governance, but resolutions passed at the Lambeth Conference are not binding on any member churches unless they choose to modify their own canons to be bound by them. However, a church that rejects too much of the doctrine of the Anglican Communion may find itself unwelcome to be or remain part of that communion. For an example of what the Synod Fathers are thinking, let's take a look at what our dear friend Archbishop Coleridge from Down Under has to say on this issue. He said this on Twitter. Synodality, some claim, is an Anglican model of church governance, which reminded me of a comment by the Anglican delegate at Synod 2015. Why did the Anglicans send someone to a Catholic synod? But okay, that the difference is the papacy, which makes a synodality of Synod 2018 distinctively Catholic. Mind you, we could learn a thing or two from the Anglicans, unless we Catholics think we're the Church of all graces. Newsflash, Archbishop, we are the Church of all graces. This is the church that Christ established. Unless you don't believe that. But let's stick to the topic at hand. If we see the synodal document that comes out of the synod on the undermining of the family focus heavily on the concept of a synodal church, this is what they're talking about. The whole point of moving the church in that direction is to defang the church, to undermine the central authority of the papacy itself, and to move towards more regional authority. In the aftermath of the Amoris Laetitia debacle, you now have different rules on whether the so-called divorced and remarried can receive Holy Communion in different dioceses. For example, in the Archdiocese of Portland, Archbishop Sample has reinforced traditional church teaching on this issue, while in Chile, rather infamously, they have permitted active adulterers to receive Holy Communion, and they've received signals from Rome that that is how that document should be interpreted. That's the synodal church in action. No longer is the papacy treated as Christ's vicar, with the social and church reign of Christ the King, while the Pope is essentially his prime minister, and the bishops the minister's agents in the field. Now, the bishops are given greater weight, and the Pope has reduced authority in church governance. As of now, the Pope can still excommunicate and even remove active bishops on a whim, but for how long? The underlying issue at hand is modernism, as it always is. We saw in this disastrous synod so-called young people giving instruction to the bishops, telling them how the church needs to change in various ways. And even with some bishops accepting that, why anybody cares what young people think on anything is beyond my understanding. The new model of a synodal church would take the input of the laity, their lived experiences, their relative needs, or in the language of the modernists, their religious experiences, and take that up to the Pope, who then ruminates on how to move forward in such a way that acts on those religious experiences, issuing a purposefully ambiguous document that will permit the church to act differently in each national conference based on the interpretation of those bishops. Strangely enough, the Holy Father himself recently decried political populism, yet seems to be encouraging a much more dangerous form of populism, this spiritual and religious populism that will, in essence, take the Catholic Church and fundamentally change it from nation to nation. But I suppose consistency is the very last thing we should expect from Rome these days. Please continue praying for the Church. If you like videos like this, like and share this video and subscribe, and click that notification bell below. I can be found on Twitter and Facebook with links in the description. For Return to Tradition, I'm Anthony Stein. Ave Maria.